is the FlightScope i4 rangefinder, the first rangefinder FlightScope has ever made, and it's got a few tricks up its sleeve. The question is whether or not those tricks are worth the $499 price tag that this carries along with it. Today I'm going to do a full review. I'm going to break down everything that I like about it, the things I don't, and I'm going to help you try and decide if it's the right product for you to pick up as we head into golf season. Ready? Let's do this thing. All right, so first off, let's establish what the FlightScope i4 rangefinder is and why it even exists in the first place. So this is part of a growing sub-niche of the golf rangefinder that we'll call smart rangefinders. And every smart rangefinder does things a little bit different. Some might have GPS built into the viewfinders. Many of them have to pair with an app in order to get that GPS data. And some of the latest models this year have a virtual caddy feature that is going to make club recommendations based on your actual data. That is why this particular one exists. You see, what it can do is it can take your launch monitor data. Once it knows how far you hit each club, it will then give you a recommendation based on the actual conditions you are playing in. So it's not just going to take into account slope. That's too pedestrian. No, it's going to take into account altitude, weather, temperature, even wind to give you what they say is going to be the most accurate personalized yardages possible. The question is, does it work, and do you really need it? All right, before we get into all that, let's talk about first impressions. What's it like opening up this bad boy out of the box? The packaging, it's got a nice magnetic box. It's very nice. The device itself is fine. You know, as far as rangefinders go, it's certainly not the most high-end feeling one that I've ever seen. It's got some nice rubberized texture on the sides and on the bottom that help with grip. It's got a very nice form factor. It's very easy to use. I would say it's mid-size. It's not super compact, but it's far from the biggest rangefinder I've used. There's two buttons on the top. We're going to talk more about what those do in a little bit. So overall, as far as build quality, presence, it's fine. It doesn't scream, this is a super high-end rangefinder, but it also doesn't necessarily feel super cheap either. The i4 does have a rechargeable battery. You peel this off here, you've got a USB-C charger. It is rated for 15,000 accuations. So basically, you're gonna be able to play a whole bunch of rounds with this before you're ever gonna have to worry about charging it. So it's been really nice to see with the most modern rechargeable rangefinders, in most cases, you can probably go months, if not an entire season, without charging it. So that's great to see here. As far as waterproofness, this is rated IPX4, which is usually on the lower end of what you're going to see in rangefinders. That essentially means it's splash proof. So if you throw it in a lake or if you throw it in water, it's probably not going to survive. But again, with pretty much any rangefinder, this one included, I'm not overly concerned. If it gets wet in the rain, I wouldn't be terrified that something was going to happen to it. I just wouldn't, throw it into a lake or anything like that. Okay, so before we talk about performance, let's talk about setup and how it actually gives you these personalized numbers. So before you can use the i4 to its full potential, you've got a few things you're going to need to do. First thing you're going to want to do is get the FlightScope app. This is one area where I've actually really been impressed by FlightScope as of late because they continue to update the FlightScope app and making it better and better. Even though the Mevo Plus launch monitor has been out for 5 years now, they continue to add features to it and continue to make the app better and better. So I'm glad that with this, they rolled it into the existing FlightScope app as opposed to having a secondary app for this. So while FlightScope is no Garmin in terms of the sheer number of products they have in their ecosystem, the fact that the app does so much across their different devices and are getting continuous updates, I'm really excited by. And when this came out just over the course of the last month, it got a big refresh in terms of aesthetics, and so the app is looking more modern than ever. Hey, real quick, still not sure if this is the right rangefinder for you? Go take our 30-second quiz. You're gonna answer a few questions around what you're looking for, and I'm gonna give you my best recommendation on the device that I think best fits your needs. The link is right below, and you can do it while you're watching the rest of this video. So you download the app, and then you pair the i4 with the app via Bluetooth. It is super seamless. You turn this on, you open up the app, and the app recognizes the i4 instantaneously. It might have been the quickest Bluetooth connection I have ever used across a tech device. So if that's as far as you want to go, that's what's going to enable you to get all that localized data like altitude, temperature, wind, and it will adjust the plays like distance in the viewfinder accordingly. And while that customized data is a big selling point of this device, they take it even further. As I mentioned, you can also get personalized club recommendations based on your actual data. So there's two ways to get that data. The primary way, the way that most people who have this device are going to do it, is you use your FlightScope launch monitor, and you're going to go in and do a gapping session. So first off, this is a new feature within the FlightScope app, which is great. This is something that's been missing, and I'm glad that they now have it. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to hit 5 to 10 shots with every single one of your clubs, and it's then going to give you an average distance for every single club in your bag, so you know what your gaps are and you know how far you actually hit the ball. For instance, I was surprised that the difference between my sand wedge and my gap wedge was actually more significant than I thought it was going to be. So once you've got that data, when you go to rangefinder mode in the app, you are going to tell it where you are, you're going to make sure this is paired, and then you're going to select that gapping session, and that's what's going to enable this to know what your distances are so it can make those recommendations on the course. I did run into one small hiccup the first time I used this, and this is worth mentioning. This is actually one of the biggest detriments in my mind to the FlightScope ecosystem. So what happened is I did my gapping session using the FlightScope iPad app. And then when I was on the course to use this, I was using my phone. But unfortunately, the apps across different devices don't speak to each other. So when I do a session on my iPad, that won't automatically sync to the app on my iPhone. They do have something called FlightScope Cloud, where all that gets synced via a browser, but I've found the experience using that to be pretty cumbersome, and I'm pretty sure that even though that's in the cloud, there's no way for me to select that gapping session from my iPad on my phone. I may be wrong, but in all the testing I was doing, I couldn't figure out how to do it. I do believe there's a way I can export that data from my iPad and then re-import it onto my phone, but when I'm standing on the first tee trying to set up my gapping session, there was no way to do that because I didn't have that iPad data. Okay, so how does this thing perform? What's it like to use on the course? Well, first off, it's got 6x optics that look really good. Everything looks really clear, the optics are very nice, and everything from that standpoint looks like a high-end rangefinder. Because of all the different features this has and all the different things it can do, there is quite a bit going on when you look through the viewfinder. If you've watched some of my other reviews, you tend to know that I have a preference for more minimalist styling when it comes to rangefinders, but overall, I wasn't as bothered with everything that was going on as I expected it to be. It all has a purpose, and it's laid out in a way that's pretty user-friendly and easy to use. I found the laser and the rangefinder capabilities of this to be excellent and as good as anything else I have used. One of the things I really liked is that when you're shooting a target, it will always vibrate, but when it locks onto the flag, it will double vibrate. So it'll be like, brr, 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 brr. And that's how you know that it's locked onto the flag. A lot of less expensive rangefinders don't have that differentiation between a flag lock and just a regular target. So I liked having that extra verification that it was hitting the flag, and it helped me know that my distance was accurate. I've got to say, I'm someone who generally thinks that a lot of these like super high-tech rangefinders that give you super personalized distances, I kind of think it's all a little on the gimmicky side. I don't necessarily need my slope calculation to factor in altitude and elevation and all of that stuff. It's like I can kind of help compensate for that on my own. But with that being said, and knowing that was my frame of mind, I was actually pretty impressed with how accurate this was given the conditions that I was playing in. So for instance, in my testing, some of the numbers that I was getting with this were at least like 5 yards different than what I was expecting them to be. Now keep in mind, that's taking into account traditional slope, temperature, elevation, and wind, and probably some other things. And so as I was testing, I said, okay, I'm going to play this as it is recommending it to me. And in most cases, I found that it was right. And in some cases, I actually used a different club than I might have otherwise, specifically because of the recommendations it gave me. And that was kind of a surprise to me, and it worked really well. That being said, for as good as those distance calculations were, not everything has been perfect with my experience here. So for instance, the wind is one thing that I'm still a little unsure about. So what it does is when it's paired with the app, it takes wind data from wherever the nearest weather station is. Well, here's the problem. We don't know if that weather station's a mile away or 20 miles away. So it's really tough to tell how accurate that data is. Pretty much every other rangefinder I've reviewed that has wind data, I just kind of write it off. I say it doesn't seem that helpful, and it's not necessarily any different here. Along with that, this won't tell you wind direction. They're making the assumption that you're going to have a better idea of which direction the wind is blowing than that weather station that might be 15 miles away. So what you have to do is as you're ranging, on the left-hand side, you will see a little meter for wind, and it will show you what the wind speed is, but then you have to flip through to select what direction the wind is blowing. So within the viewfinder, there's a circle, and there's 8 different boxes for which direction the wind can be blowing. You then continuously hit the mode button until it is set to the direction that the wind is blowing. One thing that I thought was kind of annoying is I wanted to flip through really quickly, so if I was like double clicking or triple clicking, it wouldn't register, so you had to kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that just kind of slowed me down. The other thing I found is that it didn't seem like the wind speed was updating all that often. For instance, I'd go 3 or 4 holes and it would say the wind speed is 6.5 miles per hour, which maybe that is the case, but on a golf course where often there can be swirly winds that are moving direction and it's blowing different, it didn't seem like it was always that accurate for the exact location where I was. There were other times where I just wasn't entirely sure what direction the wind is blowing. I was kind of like thinking, so I'd grab a blade of grass and throw it up to try and get a sense of what was going on, because at ground level, let's say the wind isn't super bad, but up in the air where the ball's going, it's a lot worse. So if I'm thinking, well, maybe it's into my face, but it's actually at my back, then the club recommendation is likely to be different depending on what the wind is doing. So without doing a little testing, like throwing up some grass or something, I didn't always trust myself to know exactly what the wind was doing. And finally, the last thing I want to mention on this point is that because wind is a factor in the club recommendation it gives you, you need to make sure that every time you're looking for a club recommendation, you are setting the right wind direction. And taking that extra step and setting the wind direction every single time I'm trying to get a yardage, honestly, it just took a little bit more time than I really wanted it to. And while in the end, it did do what it say it was going to do, it did seem to give me very accurate numbers and it gave me good club recommendations, it still was one extra feature that slowed me down on the golf course that I personally didn't necessarily love. Speaking a little more on the club recommendations it gives, I did find them for the most part to be really accurate. And so I tried to play the clubs that it was giving me. And as I mentioned earlier, in some cases that was a different club than what I would have used on my own. And in pretty much every case, it ended up being the right move. That being said, there were a few anomalies with some of the recommendations. So for instance, on a par 4, I had a bad drive. I found myself 278 yards out right in the middle of the fairway. Because me and my hybrids and my woods were not in great shape right now, I didn't gap those, so it just went driver to 4-iron. So in the middle of the fairway, 278, obviously for me, like 11 handicap, I'm probably not gonna hit driver off the deck. That's not a great look, that's not a great move. I'm gonna hit my 4-iron, probably be 80 to 100 yards short, try and hit a wedge, and then make a putt for par. It recommended I use my driver in that scenario. So while there's a little fine tuning that their algorithm could use as far as those club recommendations, in that scenario, I think it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. I didn't need its recommendation. Where the recommendations were a little more useful were, say, on a par 3 that's a little downhill, that had some wind involved, and that's where it's like, okay, I was probably gonna hit my 7-iron, but oh, no, you said 6-iron. Okay, let's do that, and I had good results there. Also, as we've made it clear, to get all of that data, it has to be paired to your phone and the app. And this is the case with every single rangefinder like this I have used, is that if you don't use it for a few holes, it inevitably will disconnect from the app. So you go in, none of that data is there. All you have to do is open up your phone and open up the app, and immediately it repairs and is there. But that's like a minor frustration I've experienced with every other product like this, is eventually it does lose that connection and you're gonna have to go into your phone, open up the app in order to reestablish it. In a couple rounds with this, that's only happened to me 2 or 3 times. It's quick to solve. I usually have my phone in my pocket, but it is a minor annoyance. So with all of that in mind, should you buy the FlightScope i4? The answer, maybe. If you are a die-hard FlightScope user, you use the Mevo Plus app, you've got the X3, whatever it is, and you want that extra data that is personalized to you, as well as all the benefits of those personalized yardages that take into account slope, elevation, altitude, temperature, all of that stuff, then this is great. It does pretty much exactly what it says it's going to do, and it does it very well, with the exception of some of those things I mentioned in this video. I do also want to note that you don't have to have a FlightScope launch monitor in order to use this device. If you have used a different launch monitor, or if you have your club gapping data, you can plug it in and it will still work with this. And even better than that, if you don't have all that data, but you've got a general idea of how far your 7-iron goes, your pitching wedge goes, your driver goes, you can put in that information, and then it's going to make a guess on all those other clubs based on the data you put in. And again, so its accuracy is based on the information that you feed it. And I did find that the algorithm seemed to work pretty well and get reasonably close when I gave it that limited information. Because as I mentioned, when I did that first round, I wasn't able to get the gapping data because I didn't have it on my phone. So circling back to the question of should you buy it, the answer I think for most people is probably not. Considering that most people don't need all of the fancy stuff that this provides. For $279, you can go out and get the Voice Caddy TL1, which has a beautiful dual color OLED display. It's just as accurate in terms of yardages and distances and doing all of the basic things that most people are going to need it to do. And the build quality in that feels a little more robust as well. And the majority of golfers, that's all you really need. You just want a rangefinder that's going to tell you how far away the flag is as quickly, accurately, and easily as possible. And the Voice Caddy that I just mentioned and a whole bunch of other devices do that very well. But there are people out there that do want more out of their rangefinder. They want the most personalized, most accurate data they can possibly get. They love the idea of being able to do a gapping session and have that club data fed directly into their rangefinder so that they're getting those personalized caddy recommendations on every shot they hit. And if that is you, then this device, for the most part, does everything it says it's going to do, and it does it really well. Is it perfect? No. And I covered all the issues I had with it throughout this review. Oh, except I didn't mention this red light. This means slope mode is on. It stays on for a really long time, and I assume that means because it's still paired with your phone, but every time I like pull it out of my bag and that red light is still on, that seems kind of odd. So I don't know, that's neither here nor there, but worth mentioning. I think the biggest hang up I have with this is the price. $499 is a whole lot of money for a rangefinder. So you just kind of have to ask yourself, how much are those personalized features worth it to you? If they're worth, say, $200 or $300 more than what you pay for a regular rangefinder, then by all means, go out and get it. And it is worth mentioning that there is another ecosystem that does a similar thing, and that's the Foresight Bushnell ecosystem. So right now, the new Foresight GC3S costs $37.99, but it comes with a Bushnell Pro X3 Link rangefinder. So the Pro X3 line of rangefinders, they are the best of the best. They are excellent. They cost $600 on their own, and in terms of build quality, optics, all of those things, it is a significant step up from this. But in order to get into that ecosystem, you're looking at a GC3S, which is $37.99, plus it's $500 a year for the subscription to be able to use all the software. All of a sudden, that's a whole lot of money. Whereas you can get a base Mevo Plus on sale for around $1,800, you spend $499 on this, actually $475 because you can use our coupon code to save an additional 5%, and you're essentially getting the same type of data for a fraction of the price as you are in that system. So if you came to this video and you've been considering this specifically for these features and you've been comparing the two, here's the quick comparison. This does a great job, it's a fraction of the price, but the rangefinder isn't as high quality as you will get over there. So take all that for what it's worth. With all of that said, and all those tangents and all those rambles, overall, I was really impressed with this. I do think it should be like $200 cheaper. If this were $299 or even like $349, I would absolutely say yes. For a lot of people, this is worth the buy. At $499, that's a lot of money, and so I think it's only for those people that are diehards about looking for those extra personalization features. With that, my name is Sean Ogle. I'm the founder of this thing where we talk about cool golf products and cool golf courses. If you're still not sure which rangefinder is right for you, go take our 30-second quiz. You're gonna answer a few questions around what you're looking for, and I'm gonna give you my best recommendation on the device that I think best fits your needs. With that, I hope you have an excellent day, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace.